A Fox News alert as we have an all clear in London. There were reports of shots fired at the Oxford Circus underground station, and that sparked a panic on Black Friday in London, one of the busiest streets there, one of the busiest times of day, one of the busiest times of year. Police responding to the scene with weapons, saying they found no evidence of gunfire or, for that matter, anything suspicious. As you might imagine, the reports said people running for cover in London's busiest shopping district. One woman suffered a minor injury in the chaos. The underground station there is now back open.
Congress set to hit the ground running next week, with lawmakers looking to pass historic tax reform and avoid a government shutdown, all while dealing with a growing sexual harassment scandal. Welcome to a new hour inside America's News headquarters. I'm Melissa Francis.
Oh, great to be with you. Yeah. Hour 2 here. Hope you're having a great Black Friday. I'm Leland Vittert. President Trump hoping a tax bill will be on his desk for Christmas.
And he will be meeting with Senate Republicans on Tuesday as they get ready to vote on their version of tax reform.
Kristen Fisher with the latest from Washington. So, Kristen, at the same time, Congress trying to get all this done, they're also dealing with all these sexual harassment allegations. How big of a distraction is it, given how tight the calendar is?
It's a huge distraction, Leland, at a time when Congress, as you mentioned, already had a massive end-of-year to-do list. In addition to Republican Senate candidate Roy Moore down in Alabama, you have Republican Congressman Joe Barton dealing with that naked picture of him, which appeared on an anonymous Twitter account. You've got Democratic Congressman John Conyers. He reportedly settled a sexual harassment claim with funding from taxpayers. And then, of course, Democratic Senator Al Franken of Minnesota. 2 more women have come out since Tuesday accusing him of inappropriately touching them during campaign events. The congressman weighed in last night by saying, quote, "I've met tens of thousands of people and taken thousands of photographs, often in crowded and chaotic situations. I'm a warm person. I hug people. I've learned from recent stories that in some of those encounters, I crossed the line for some women, and I know that any number is too many." So you have these ongoing ethics investigations. You have the election for the Alabama Senate seat on December 12th. And Leland, of course, don't forget, there could be more accusations against more congressmen coming before the end of the year.
Yeah, it seems as though every day there's a new revelation you just didn't expect to come out.
Right.
On that note, the calendar doesn't change, nor does the to-do list. So they get back from Thanksgiving break. They come back into Washington next week. Clock starts. Where does it go from there?
Well, before anything else, Congress has to pass a short-term spending bill. It expires exactly 2 weeks from today. So on Tuesday, President Trump, he's going to be meeting with congressional leaders to figure out how to avoid a government shutdown. First, they have to agree on total government spending levels. That hasn't even happened yet. And then they have to actually write the funding bill for the rest of the fiscal year. And don't forget DACA. Democrats may try to use that for leverage. And then, of course, there's tax reform. President Trump's top priority. He's promised massive tax cuts by Christmas. So a lot to do and not a lot of time, Leland.
All right, Kristen Fisher there in Washington will be covering it all for us this weekend as well. Kristen, good to see you. See you this weekend. More on this, we'll bring in Kelly Jane Torrance of the Weekly Standard. Kelly Jane, always nice to see you. Thanks for coming in. The last time there was the potential of a government shutdown, you had the big four, McConnell, Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Paul Ryan, all head to the White House, and it was Chuck and Nancy, as the president likes to call them, who walked away with a big win. Are Republicans in Congress worried that the president might undercut them again to try and get a deal here?
I think they are. And, we've heard that the president plans to meet with all 4 of those people again next week. Now, there's no word on whether he's going to meet with them all together and what days exactly he's going to meet with them. But the fact is he is meeting with them. And with President Trump, you never know quite what can happen. I think people were very surprised that he managed to cut a deal with Pelosi and Schumer the first time. And as the clock is really ticking now. So, it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks in Washington. Anything can happen.
We know that the Democrats would love nothing more than to embarrass their fellow Republicans in Congress, and especially in some way embarrass the president or put him into a jam. Is DACA the place to do that?
Yeah, I think actually that's going to be a difficult one for the Democrats to do because there's actually a fair amount of bipartisan support on DACA. Now, even though immigration is, it's a bit of a divisive issue within the Republican Party, the fact that these people are the young people brought in as children without their, they had nothing to do with it. It's a very sympathetic group of people. And you see even, top congressional leaders like Paul Ryan think that something should be done for them. So while immigration's a difficult issue, this is one area in which there's actually a lot of bipartisan support for this sympathetic group. And I'm actually not sure the Democrats are going to be able to embarrass Republicans on it. But I do think Republicans should use it as leverage if they can. Say, hey, if you want this DACA, hey, give us this. And I think it's a perfect issue to use leverage on because it's something that's really going to be a win-win.
To that point, the president just in the past couple of minutes tweeting about the terror attack in Egypt at the same time saying this is just further proof we need the wall, and we've seen those two, the wall and DACA linked before. On the side of this, and so you might also sort of think of this as an alternate reality. You have these sexual harassment allegations, Al Franken, John Conyers, Joe Barton on the list right now involved in this, potentially more. We've always heard rumors over the past week or so that there could be more congressmen who will become embroiled in this. And yet you talk to leadership and they go, oh, never mind, this is just sort of something that's happening. We're going to get all this done. Is that an alternate reality view of the world, or can they get through without this distraction?
I think it's going to be difficult for them to ignore it because the Democrats have been complaining about the character of the president and many Republicans for months now. And I think it's very difficult for them to criticize the president and others on character if they're going to sit back and let someone like John Conyers stay in Congress. I mean, this man used taxpayer money to settle sexual harassment claims. It's kind of incredible that Democrats are not at all calling for him to step down. And we're hearing by the day, it seems like more women coming out and saying that they had a difficult time working for John Conyers. And, he's a member, he's an 88-year-old guy, one of the founders of the Congressional Black Caucus. And, I'm reading stories that say Democrats are sort of scared to go after him. Well, what's more important, the people who are supposedly powerful, who are preying on other people, or those people who are being preyed on? And I think Democrats really are wrong if they think they can ignore this. And I think, the American people are tired of hearing about the Democrats complain about character and then, fine when it's someone on their side.
So far, it has kind of worked for them. Al Franken basically saying, I'm not going to resign. He promises to address the media on Sunday. As you point out, more and more allegations against him. This is his latest statement. This is apology version number 3. Some women have found my greetings or embraces for a hug or photo inappropriate, and I respect their feelings about it. Some women have found my greetings or embraces for a hug or photo. And let me say again to Minnesotans that I'm sorry for putting them through this, and I'm committed to regaining their trust. Put aside for a moment, as Melissa pointed out in the last hour, sort of the ridiculousness of writing this all off to, I like to give people hugs and I'm a warm person. We'll put that aside for a moment and go with this. Al Franken was a powerful political voice for the Democrats. They're protecting him. They continue to protect him. But is that going to sort of long-term have a deleterious effect? Because not only is Franken's voice lost, but you've got this big distraction of this continuing until possibly he resigns.
No, that's a great point, Leland. And I have to say, by the way, I hug a lot of my friends. It doesn't involve any sort of groping. So I don't, it's a little ridiculous what he's saying. But yeah, I mean, Al Franken is one of the strongest voices in the Senate on the Democratic side. And he's one of the most hardest hitting senators for the progressive side of the Democrats. And yeah, it's going to be hard for people to take him seriously and to listen to what he's saying without having to talk about these allegations. And of course, what he did is not nearly as serious as what someone like John Conyers did. But yeah, the credibility of the Democratic Party right now is hurting. And I mean, it's amazing to me that we're finally seeing some people talk about, hey, you know what, maybe we should have had Bill Clinton resign for what he did. I think things have really changed in the last few months around sexual harassment and sexual assault issues. Yeah. And then
we saw Kristen Gillibrand have to walk that back in a pretty serious way. Yeah. Considering this was the woman who was campaigning with the Clintons only about a year ago. Kelly Jane, we'll leave it there. Thanks again.
Thanks, Leon. Happy Thanksgiving.
You too. Great conversation. Melissa?
New developments on the missing submarine in the southern Atlantic Ocean. Argentina's Navy now reporting that there was an explosion in the area of the submarine's last known location. 44 crew members were on board, and now their loved ones are losing hope. Benjamin Hall is following this story. He is live in London. Benjamin.
Yeah, Melissa, and it just gets worse. Experts say it is now highly unlikely that anyone is still alive on that submarine. And it's not just because of the explosion you mentioned. It's also because we are 9 days into this now, and the oxygen on board that vessel will be running out. News of this explosion, though, on the ARA San Juan broke yesterday. The sound was actually picked up by an international organization that listens out for illegal nuclear tests, and they heard it on the day the submarine went missing. It took them a week to analyze it, and it was actually the US that then informed Argentina. Despite this bad news, though, the search continues with more than a dozen international airplanes and ships participating. The initial search covered an area of over 185,000 square miles. That is an area larger than California, but now the search is focused right in the area where that explosion was heard. Video has also now been released from on board the submarine, and it shows a celebration which took place back in 2014, just after this submarine had gone through a refit. That refit saw it cut in half to be updated, something which is very dangerous to do for subs. And some family members have said that sailors were complaining about the state of the 215-foot vessel, which was built in 1983. Family members have also reacted angrily after it emerged that there had been a long delay before anyone was even told about the disappearance. And that's because Argentine military protocol says to wait 48 hours before starting search efforts for any submarines lost at sea. And the search is also going to be hampered by heavy seas, as well as the fact that the continental plate there drops off. So the depth of the sea starts at about half a mile, then quickly descends to 3 miles. And again, experts saying that it might be quite some time till this submarine is even found. And 44 people on board now feared dead. Melissa?
Benjamin Hall, thank you.
A South African judge is now doubling the sentence of Olympic runner Oscar Pistorius in the fatal shooting of his girlfriend. You might remember this story from back in 2013. Pistorius is now facing more than 13 years behind bars after the Supreme Court of Appeals ruled in the favor of the prosecutors. Paul Tilsley live from Johannesburg with the reaction on all of this. Hi, Paul.
Hi. Even experienced trial lawyers here are shocked at how much the judges have increased the sentence. Appeal Court Judge Willie Sariti said that the original sentence of 6 years was shockingly lenient and trivialized this serious offense.
The respondent sentenced to imprisonment for a period of 13 years and 5 months. I hereby hand down the judgment.
Actually, the judges had wanted to give Pistorius even more jail time, 15 years, but they took into account the time he's already spent in prison. The prosecution had appealed the earlier sentence, and today the judges agreed with their claims that Pistorius had failed to explain why he fired 4 shots into a toilet cubicle where his girlfriend Riva was standing. In the appeal proceedings, judges made the unusual step of joining the prosecution in asking if he claimed he believed there was an intruder in the house, why had Pistorius not fired a warning shot? Why had he fired 4 times? Why had he used a heavy handgun with armor-piercing bullets? Back to you.
All right, the family there of his victims saying they finally believe this is justice for their daughter. Paul Tilsley, Johannesburg, South Africa. Paul, thank you. Melissa?
Meantime, a developing story overseas. Hundreds of people murdered as terrorists storm an Egyptian mosque during Friday prayers. What we know about the attack and why this place of worship was targeted. Plus, a big development in the Russia probe, fueling speculation that Mike Flynn may now be cooperating with special counsel Robert Mueller. The significance of this as reaction pours in from former members of the Trump campaign.
If Mike Flynn did do something wrong, he should be held accountable. Look, Mike's not a bad guy. He served his country with distinction for a long time. But if he didn't fill out the paperwork properly and he didn't disclose that information and he wasn't honest with the FBI like anybody else, he should be held accountable.
A Texas man now under arrest accused of killing a state trooper during a Thanksgiving traffic stop. Police say Dub Brett Black shot and killed Trooper Damon Allen with a rifle Thursday night in Freestone County, Texas. It's about 90 miles south of Dallas. Black allegedly drove off after the shooting. Police tracked him down more than 100 miles away, and police are now looking into what may have prompted him to open fire.
Department of Public Safety, troopers, rangers, all are very professional individuals. They're going to investigate this to its fullest extent. Once the investigation is complete, that'll all be turned over to the local district attorney. But right now, the main focus is taking care of the scene, taking care of the family.
Okay, and this is the suspect who we are told now faces capital murder charges.
It is a move that could signal cooperation with Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian election interference. Lawyers for former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn are no longer communicating with the White House legal team, a development fueling speculation that Flynn may cut a deal with special counsel. Let's bring in Democratic strategist and Fox News contributor Jessica Tarlov and Brad Blakeman, former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush. Jessica, what do you make of this?
Well, as you just said, it's an indication that Mike Flynn may be cooperating with the Mueller investigation now. It also may mean nothing. Apparently, this can happen in any case with so many people being investigated. But I would guess, based upon the fact that we know that Mike Flynn was a foreign agent with the Turks, there was that story just about a month ago that he was potentially moving a Muslim cleric out of the U.S. to Turkey for a $15 million sum. The role of his son in the campaign and what happened during the transition when we know that he lied to Vice President Mike Pence about past work that he had done, that it would suggest that Mike Flynn might be running into the arms of Robert Mueller.
Brad, I mean, he could be cooperating, but for many different reasons, to save his own skin, to help his son. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the president.
Absolutely. And as a lawyer, I will tell you that there are many times where the witness will want to cooperate, but the lawyers will put the brakes on it. So let's blame the lawyers on this one. And there's a reason for why the cooperation is stopped, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's nefarious. It could just mean that the investigation has taken a different turn. But protecting someone's personal rights, constitutional rights, are paramount for lawyers, and that's probably what we're seeing here.
I mean, Jessica, one of the biggest problems that they would have with Michael Flynn right now would be his credibility, especially because, you know, I mean, obviously he's a very decorated soldier and so much respect, but then it comes down to the president releasing him because they said they no longer had confidence in what he was saying.
Well, he was lying to them. So, and that's well documented now, and he's put Vice President Pence in a difficult situation as well.
So that hurts his credibility, no?
It absolutely does, but that doesn't mean that there aren't things like emails or communications that they might have access to that have nothing to do with Mike Flynn's credibility. They would just be factual, right? Like if there's an email saying, I'm coming to do X, Y, or Z thing, you can't really refute that. I think that at this point, they will take any information that they can get, and I trust them to reliably parse out what is credible and what isn't. But we do know as well that Mike Flynn is very concerned about his son, as you mentioned, and this might be something that he's doing to kind of fall on the sword to make sure to protect his son.
Yeah. Brad, you know, not for nothing, but isn't this another leak that we're hearing all these things? I mean, aren't we supposed to not know about all this?
You would think that an investigation, especially one that involves criminality, should be secret. There shouldn't be no leaks, and Mueller should get a handle on what's going on within his investigation. That's the fair way to deal with people that you're trying to get to cooperate or investigating. One thing is for sure, politician investigations, Achilles heel happens to be perjury in every modern investigation. So the key here is for people to tell the truth. Very rarely are they tried for the underlying crime. It seems always to be perjury.
Yeah. Jessica, that's a great point, no?
It is, absolutely. And your point about the leaks. I mean, we've discussed this a number of times. It doesn't help anyone or national security when we do have such a leaky intelligence community, as it were. But that doesn't mean that Michael Flynn couldn't have been a key player in Russian collusion between the Trump campaign. We have the photo of him sitting at Vladimir Putin's table in 2015 with Jill Stein sitting right on the other side. So there are definitely evidence to indicate that there might be something unsavory going on there.
Yeah. Blake, I mean, there does seem to be a lot of superficial evidence of this kind of dealing across the board. Have we seen any evidence that, the president knew anything about it. And most recently, we saw Jeff Sessions come out and give testimony talking about the fact that the presidential campaign was, incredibly chaotic. And this seems to be a theme they're going to go with going forward. He said they often had no idea where they were going to end up during the day, that it was, more uncertain and more all over the place than any political campaign he had been a part of before. That lends itself to the idea that he wouldn't necessarily know about all the people that he had recently hired and what they were doing behind the scenes to feather their own nests.
No doubt about it. Donald Trump was an unconventional candidate who ran an unconventional campaign. He spent next to nothing compared to his opponent, had a skeleton staff, and there's no doubt that it was chaotic. But it got him to the presidency. And we know through the investigations to date, and even prior to Mueller being appointed, that nothing seems to have been untoward towards the president. And I have to believe that we would have heard something by now had it gone up to the candidate or the president-elect or the president himself.
Yeah. Jessica, I doubt that Democrats are going to buy this new narrative that we just started hearing maybe about a week ago.
The chaos theory?
Well, the idea that, yes, the idea that it was such an unconventional campaign that from inside nobody knew sort of what was going on, how it was changing, it was just very quick moving. That would be a good defense in this situation. And as much as Democrats like to say that it looked like it was, off the rails and just chaotic, they wouldn't like to hear it as a defense in this situation.
No, and I think that they'll pick it apart even just on the bad judgment front. Obviously this was a chaotic campaign, switched senior staffers constantly. You had Paul Manafort in and out. Luckily he got Kellyanne Conway to come and join. I think she was integral to his success in the end there. But I don't think that chaos is a defense when you're talking about collusion with Russians. When you have evidence, Don Jr. DMing with WikiLeaks, when you have the meeting at Trump Tower, et cetera, those are tangible facts on the ground. Those are things that someone should have known, no matter if you're inexperienced, no matter if you come from the business world, that you kick that up to a lawyer before you start responding. So Democrats won't like that defense. I don't think the American public will, and I don't think Bob Mueller will.
I don't know. Certainly be interesting to watch. Thanks to both of you.
Thanks. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving.
You as well.
The U.S. Navy calling off its search for 3 missing sailors in the Pacific after their cargo plane crashed. What went wrong? Plus, President Trump touting big gains against ISIS. Does he deserve the credit?
We're very, very proud of you. And believe me, everybody in this country is watching, and they're seeing positive reports for a change instead of the neutral and negative reports. It's all positive.
Tragic news to report this holiday weekend. The U.S. Navy calling off its search for 3 missing sailors. They've been missing since Wednesday when their transport plane crashed into the Western Pacific. Lucas Tomlinson is live at the Pentagon with the latest. Lucas.
IFB.
I think Lucas can't hear us. That's pretty safe to assume there. We're going to go back to him when we can. Leland.
Well, one of the things Lucas is going to talk about is sort of the difficulties the U.S. military is facing in terms of the training tempo, in terms of airplane crashes and other issues as well. Back to Lucas is at Warrants. Meantime, President Trump promising more money to rebuild the military. During a video conference with U.S. troops overseas yesterday, he also congratulated them for their progress made in fighting the Islamic State.
The fight against ISIS, it's coming our way. It's coming our way. Big, big difference. A lot of things have happened. They say we've made more progress against ISIS than they did in years of the previous administration. And that's because I'm letting you do your job.
Former U.S. Army intelligence officer Andrew Peek joining us now. We'll get to a place you know a lot about, which is Afghanistan, in a minute, but specifically to this issue of ISIS. The president's saying, I'm letting you do your jobs. The contrapositive of that, President Obama didn't let you do your jobs. Fair that he should get the credit for ISIS's downfall?
Yeah, I think there's an argument that he definitely, in 2 respects, contributed to the defeat of ISIS. I think, first of all, clearly Trump delegated more operational authority to the military the Obama National Security Council was famous for kind of micromanaging military operations. I think, secondly, very early in his administration, back in February, the Trump administration made the pretty bold decision to go ahead and empower the Syrian Kurds to capture Raqqa, the Islamic State's capital. Now, Obama had been holding back on that decision because he was afraid of angering the Turks, but Trump went ahead and did that, and I think he genuinely deserves a lot of credit for that.
From what you hear from the folks who are still in the military, does he seem to trust his military commanders' judgment and advice more than President Obama did?
Absolutely. You know, I think there is a legacy during the campaign of him enjoying talking about the military. He clearly likes how well it runs, the can-do attitude. I think one of the problems with the Obama National Security Council was that there was really nobody up there with significant military experience after the first NSC director had been fired, who was a four-star general.
All right, so we saw the president there when he met with the Coast Guardsmen and talked about sort of the work they had done, especially with Hurricane Harvey. He also was on a video conference where he talked to troops mostly in the Middle East, Afghanistan, Incirlik Air Force Base in Turkey, and you can see video of him there on the secure video conference. In that conversation, he talked about how much better things were going to get in Afghanistan, and this is what the four-star general in Afghanistan had to say in response.
The new authorities that I've been given allow me to go after the enemy in new ways. So previously, I could use air power in close support of Afghan forces. Now, in working with the Afghan government in complementary actions, we can go after all of the facets of the enemy operation.
All right, decode that for us.
Well, I think Mick Nicholson, who is the commander in that picture.
He was about to get fired, right, at one point?
Who reportedly was on thin ice. I actually served with in Afghanistan. He is a killer. He's one of the best generals this country has. I think what the president has done is to roll back some of the rules of engagement in terms of us taking on the Taliban, right? Our aircraft coming to the support of Afghan who are fighting the Taliban, not just al-Qaeda. So the Obama administration really wanted to make sure that we really only engaged militarily on certain targets like AQ. And I think Obama says, hey, and I think Trump says, hey, we need to win the war overall.
It makes sense that if you take the gloves off, so to speak, you're going to be able to inflict a lot more damage on your enemies. These are the same people who they dropped the mother of all bombs on, right?
They are, yeah.
Okay. And as we're watching, this is file video of what looks like the liberation of a number of cities by the Kurds and others from ISIS. Back to this sort of, if we tie this all together, the president vis-a-vis the military, giving them a lot more latitude on other things as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly one of the narratives that's emerged from in the first year of the administration has been that the top officials Trump feels most comfortable with are the military officers, who, for a variety, I think, of reasons. But there are other elements like Trump bumping up the Pentagon's budget, $54 billion over congressional limits. Trump delegating more operational control to Mick Nicholson, and genuinely enjoying allowing the Pentagon to take control of some of these events.
The Pentagon may be taking control, but the Pentagon's got a big issue with what they call mishaps, what the rest of us would probably call plane crashes, helicopter crashes, and ships running into each other. We just lost 3 U.S. sailors over the past couple of days in a crash. We've had other crashes, a lot of reporting out of the Pentagon that half of America's F-A-18 fighter jets can't fly. And then we had John McCain saying that this is a self-inflicted wound. $54 billion, is that enough?
You know, I think there's two components of this. One is overall management of the Pentagon, right? And that's always going to be an ongoing issue.
President's the commander-in-chief.
He's only been there for 10 months, though. I mean, this is the biggest government agency with discretionary funding in the U.S. Secondly, there is this issue of the U.S. Navy Pacific Fleet, which is a serious problem, which has had event after event after event this year that has caused casualties. Ships crashing, planes crashing. Famously, the Pacific Fleet is kind of looser run than the Atlantic Fleet, which is closer to D.C., which is a little bit more tightly knit. So I think you're going to see a real cultural change out there.
Well, the commander of the Pacific Fleet, the 7th Fleet, was already sacked. by Admiral Richardson, commander of naval operations. But in a larger sense, what they will tell you, if you talk to folks out there, is, yeah, you're right, we've got issues. But we've got sailors who are on watch 100 hours a week. We've got planes that were built in the 1950s, far older than the people who are flying them. So is it really a cultural issue or with the fleet, or is it perhaps a larger issue of military readiness?
Well, I think you could make the argument, yes, that the ongoing operations overseas have diverted money from training and long-term weapon systems purchases that have hurt the Navy more than any other service. I do think, though, the Pacific Fleet is really just has a cultural problem right now, and that's got to be segmented away from the other issues that plague the Pentagon.
All right, Melissa's got a lot more on just that issue. Andrew, thanks a lot. Good to see you.
Thanks, Leland.
That's right. The Navy is calling off a search for 3 sailors who were lost. Lucas Tomlinson is now live at the Pentagon with the latest on this one. Lucas, can you hear us now?
I sure can, Melissa.
Oh, good.
Well, this is the deadliest crash for the U.S. military since a U.S. Army Black Hawk crashed off the coast of Hawaii in August, killing all 5 soldiers aboard. And as you mentioned, the U.S. Navy calling off its search for the 3 missing American sailors following Wednesday's crash hundreds of miles at sea while flying from Japan to the USS Ronald Reagan. A former C-2 pilot tells me it's a miracle 8 survived. The Navy C-2 cargo plane is used to bring passengers and supplies to aircraft carriers at sea. It first entered service in the late 60s and is scheduled to be replaced by the V-22 Osprey in the next few years. Right now, the investigation is focusing on the possibility of an extremely rare dual-engine failure. Fuels and oil sources are also being examined. The Navy is expected to release the names of the 3 missing sailors late tonight. According to our research, the number of U.S. troops killed in plane crashes has spiked even before this latest crash Wednesday. The number killed in non-combat plane crashes this year skyrocketed by over 100% compared to this time a year ago. In fact, Melissa, just 2 days ago, before the Navy plane crash, an Air Force training jet with parts from the 1960s crashed in Texas, killing 1 pilot and injuring another. A mechanical failure is also suspected.
Perhaps the greatest harm to our national security and our military is self-inflicted. I repeat, self-inflicted. We are killing more of our own people in training than our enemies are in combat.
Congress has called for a $26 billion increase in the defense budget to rebuild the military and fix some of these airplanes. Melissa?
Lucas Tomlinson, thank you so much for that report.
Terrorists launching a deadly attack in Egypt, and the number of victims in this is staggering. The latest on the search for the killers, plus the holiday shopping season kicking off. Melissa doing some online shopping in the breaks. So do folks feel the economy is improving? And just how much are they willing to spend? Why, the answer may come down to politics. And thanks to Melissa, retailers have high hopes for this year.
This is going to be a strong holiday shopping season. Our forecast is for 3.8% growth, a strong economy, good job numbers, good consumer sentiment. So I do think we're going to have a very strong holiday season.
Egyptian state media reporting terrorists killed at least 235 people in an attack on a mosque in the northern Sinai Peninsula. Police say the gunmen approached on off-road vehicles, opening fire in the middle of a crowded prayer service. More than 100 others were wounded. Militants tied to ISIS are suspected of carrying out this attack.
On this Black Friday, new questions about how willing shoppers will be to open their wallets this year. A new analysis from the Wall Street Journal of Gallup polling finds that people are more likely to believe the economy is improving if they voted for President Trump, with the opposite being the case for those who voted for Hillary Clinton. And the data also shows that people's beliefs may be swayed by where they live as well. Here now, let's bring in Eric Erickson. He is founder of The Resurgent and a Fox News contributor. So what's your take on this?
Well, it just goes to show how much partisanship has poisoned the well here. Democrats used to lecture Republicans that the economy was improving. If only Barack Obama weren't Democrat, they would recognize it. Well, the same goes true for them now. In fact, the economy has improved more now than it was when Barack Obama was president, and yet Democrats suddenly don't think the country's going in the right direction and the economy's on the downturn. It's ridiculous, particularly because they live in some of the areas of the country that are thriving the most under President Trump. They just can't give him credit.
Yeah, so it does sound ridiculous, but then at the same time, so much of the economy and shopping is about sentiment. I mean, you go out and you spend more for the holiday season if you have the perception that you're doing better, and especially that things are going to get better in the future, and we're on the upswing. You feel more relaxed, you're looser with your wallet. So it is, in many instances, a self-fulfilling prophecy as people go out there and they spend more money and sort of stir up the economy, no?
Yes, very much so. But, particularly with among Democrats now, everything has become political. Where you eat, what you eat, where you shop.
I think you could say that about both sides. I mean, let me jump in there because it's just, we don't want to blame one side or the other necessarily. You started this out in the beginning by saying that, Democrats complained that Republicans wouldn't give President Obama credit for any upswing in the economy.
Yes, that's true. But among Democrats in particular, I mean, even the polling shows, the same polling on the economy shows, Democrats tend to view things much more politically than Republicans tend to. They're much less likely to be surrounded by people of the other party than Republicans are. So in times like this, when Washington's not going in their direction, they tend to have a more negative reaction than Republicans, who, yes, blame Barack Obama, but all the polling has shown consistently for the last 4 years that Democrats, though, view things much more partisanly. So there may be an economic upswing, but because the Democrats aren't in charge of it, they're less likely to ascribe credit to the opposing party.
And then there are a whole bunch of people who can't afford to be concerned about politics and who's getting credit, and they're really just focused on what their checking account looks like, how much money they have, how much they can afford for Christmas, whether people in their family are employed. A lot of people in the middle of the country are feeling better about what's going on right now. We heard that forecast going into the last break that this holiday season could be up 3.8% over last year. What do you think that means going forward?
Well, it's great for these areas that were disaffected under President Obama and voted for President Trump. It does look like the economy is improving there. Much of the economy over the last decade has improved in urban areas, but not necessarily rural areas. It looks like there's a rural upswing happening in the economy. And by the way, this is another reason Republicans should pass common sense tax reform now, because that'll continue to get this economic ball rolling.
Yeah, so that was one of the things that the study found, was that people in rural areas felt better about the economy right now. Do you think that has to do with politics? Or is there something different going on there than's going on in the cities?
I do think so. I think that a lot of people in rural areas in the country felt left behind over the last decade. Tech jobs were going into cities, major corporations moving into major metropolitan areas, but places like where I live in the middle of Georgia didn't necessarily feel part of that economic upswing. And now they're starting to, as people are leaving cities and they're moving back into rural areas, if only to commute, but they're bringing money with them, shopping in local businesses in rural parts of the country, and that's definitely being felt.
So what have you seen in your part of Georgia? Have you physically seen changes that make you think that there's business coming to your area that wasn't there before, or is it just a sentiment? Real quick.
Yeah, it is sentiment, but it's also, for example, Amazon.com is building a fulfillment center in Middle Georgia. That's going to create 1,000 jobs in a very rural area. People are starting to feel this.
Yeah, no, that's tangible. Eric Erickson, thank you so much. Leland.
Thank you.
Well, speaking of shopping, it is one of the busiest shopping days of the year. So maybe you know someone who got up really early like these people, or even hit the malls before the turkey was carved. That seems wrong. But anyway, what everyone is standing in line for, and we'll check in if there's anything left on the shelves.
What time did you have to get here?
I was here Monday night. Right after work, I came here at 8.